impact to industry. And of course, welcome to Belfast, all of you that have travelled over. My name is Louise Cushnahan. I'm Head of Innovation with the Centre for Secure Information Technologies, part of Queen's University Belfast. And my role across the Institute is not technical at all. I'm really there to encourage and facilitate the translation and impact from the research that goes on within the Institute for really the economic benefit of the wider UK cyber economy. And one of the ways that we've done this over the past 8 years is by working with startups and scale-ups through UK government-funded programs such as Lorca and Cyber Runway. So the theme of the panel session today is really discussing the importance of, or indeed, I guess, the lack of importance of that academic research and the translation of this really through the startups and scale-ups to help solve and contribute to the overall theme of the Cyber UK conference in terms of the securing of an open and resilient digital future. So at this point, I'd like to welcome our panel and really ask them just to introduce themselves very quickly in terms of who they are and their companies, and then we'll move into sort of a semi-prepared panel session, but we are going to try and keep it very informal. So thank you, and over to you, Shadi.
Thanks, Louise. Hi, everyone. My name is Shadi Razak. I'm a computer engineer by education, but a cybersecurity professional by trade and then education. I've been working in cyber for the past 20 years across C&I, supply chain, and financial sectors. And I think I was blessed that I've worked through academia and research, but then also through corporate organizations and government organization, ending into becoming an entrepreneur through life and, with an exit to Microsoft back in the day. But nowadays, I'm still as an entrepreneur, and I'm a co-founder and the CTO of Ngoka, which is the first Northern Ireland graduate from the NCSC startup program for innovation and one of the fast-growing cyber startups in NI at the moment. And Ngoka focuses on securing machine-to-machine type of communications, giving the abilities for system and devices to generate an immutable quantum-safe DNA, which then make the system capable to decentralize the process of key management and identity management and build trust between devices across different networks. And academia have played an important role into that, which we will discuss later on.
Hi folks, my name is Brad Srigangan. I'm the R&D director at BeSecure. So I studied engineering for life sciences at the University of Cambridge, and then worked for an automotive wireless sensing supplier for a number of years as a systems design engineer before starting at BeSecure about 5.5 years ago. So at BeSecure, our mission is to save lives. We're slightly different maybe from some of the other organizations here. We're doing that through advancing hard health technology. And really our goal is to try and advance proactive and preventative healthcare through our suite of software algorithms. So we have algorithms in healthcare management, so looking at your heart rhythm and working out is there any irregularities that might be a sign of something more serious. But we also do wellness monitoring as well, so stress, which I'm sure all of us are very intimately familiar with, being able to monitor that and provide that quantitative feedback to people. And then finally, our sort of original flagship algorithm and what we worked very closely with CSIT on was our user identification algorithm. So using your unique heartbeat to then identify and verify you as a biometric identifier, whilst also then protecting any data that you might derive from that signal.
Great, Brad.
Thank you very much, Louise. It's very much great to be part of Cyber UK's Stream C Securing Foundation for Technology Advantage. My name's Dr. Emma Taylor. I'm Head of Digital Safety at Razor Secure, a rail cybersecurity company. I've got more than 30 years' experience across 3 C&I sectors: aerospace, transport, and energy. Risk and safety, and now with an ever-increasing overlap between safety and cybersecurity, from everything from regulatory support to applied research. Razor Secure was one of the early graduates of the GCHQ Accelerator program back in 2017. A year later, we did our first production deployment on a transport network. We now support 9 train operating companies, work with 5 major train builders, and are operational on 3,200 rail vehicles and counting. And very much this is a question about resilience transport, what's needed. And we clearly, with cybersecurity network monitoring on trains, you need to look for anomalous behavior, you need to use security gateways to separate critical networks. But there's a little bit more involved. If you think about transport, trains have got 4-car unit, maybe more than 100 IP-connected devices. A train is a mobile data center. And when you start to look at the complexities of asset discovery and of all the things associated with baselining to pick up anomalous behavior, devices being connected, and then you add into the realms of digital maintenance through life asset monitoring, very much there becomes a strong need for research and partnership across all aspects of the supply chain. And we've been lucky enough to have cooperations and partnerships with organizations such as Siemens Mobility, University of Birmingham, and also links with organizations and networks such as Petrus. I'm very much looking forward to this discussion and moving towards our common goal of an open and resilient digital future.
Thanks, Emma.
Hi, I'm Josh Walter. I'm one of the founding partners at a firm called Osney Capital. We're a venture capital firm investing into pre-seed and seed stage opportunities purely within cybersecurity, purely in the UK market. So very focused investment thesis, focused just on this sector. So that's me, short and sweet. There you go. And I've got 2 mics as well, which I'm trying to... There you go.
Great, Josh. Thank you so much for the intros and, of course, for being part of the panel. Oh, you should have stuck with the two mics. And, of course, for being part of the panel today. So bringing it back to the theme, and again, all of you I know very well, and a number of you have been to Belfast, indeed Belfast based, and been to Belfast on many occasions. So bringing it back to the topic for the panel today, and of course the overall conference theme, as Emma said, for securing an open and resilient digital future, and the role, if any, of the translation of academic research into industry in achieving that theme. I mean, we heard Lindy this morning in her keynote address mentioned that collaboration between government, industry and academia several times, and indeed that foundation, securing the foundation of technology. So really looking in, taking that bit further as to how do we get that translation from the academic research out into the startup and scale-up community. So over to the panel then for a few questions. So you're all at different stages of your growth trajectory and indeed have had different journeys to get there to the stage that you're at today. So if I can ask the 3 companies, first of all, when you were starting out and, of course, now that you're continuing to grow and answer the challenges and solve the problems within the marketplace, what role, if any, did or does academia or academic research play in enabling that innovation? Shadi, if I go to you first.
I mean, it plays an important role depending on the stage that you are in. You know, it's when you're trying to innovate, you need to collaborate with people that they will have the expertise in the industry that you are targeting. And that comes as 2 parts, either from companies within that sector or from academia. Now, companies within the sector, they will be focusing on their day offering and their products, while in academia, they have the freedom to look at it from different perspectives. And that's quite important, especially when you are starting the journey for you. And for us, it played a key role for Ngoka, which is one of the main reasons why we are based in Belfast. Through the work and the collaboration with CISA and Queen's at the early days, which help us to build and direct our research and the development of our technology. But it's not even there, it doesn't stop there, but even when we are growing and we are scaling up, that continues because that interactions becomes more different into that side, and that collaborations becomes different through the process. But it still help us and continue to evolve and scale. But it's not just from a research perspective, but also the engagement with the university, also on the projects that we are doing, allow us to engage with master's students and potentially bright graduates that you can slowly secure your talent moving forward into the process. And I think, you know, and Lindsay hit the nail on the head, that triple helix, that collaboration between government, academia, and private sector, and I would specify more on the SMEs and the startups, is actually the nerve of us building the cyber craftsmanship that we have in the UK and the future as well.
Thanks, Shadi. So, Braj, as you mentioned, you're R&D director within BSecure. So research is clearly valued by BSecure. So again, how did or does academia form part of that research roadmap?
I mean, Shadi, for our sort of experience with academia has been very, very similar to what Shadi's outlined. And, you know, as a company, BSecure was founded in Northern Ireland because of access to the great institutions we have here. And as Shadi mentioned, that kind of clear pipeline of very intelligent graduates who've got a world-class education was a key aspect for us as well. But in terms of more kind of, obviously, as we've grown now and you know, we're not necessarily as reliant on a day-to-day basis. What we found is academia can help fill that role, both from a future predicting, you know, as an R&D department, we're not thinking 2 months ahead, we're thinking 2 years ahead. We're trying to guess what's happening, what technologies are coming out, and what's, you know, where the markets might lead. And often that starts with institutions like Queen's and Ulster and other organizations. So sort of staying very close lets us stay quite close on the pulse of the industry and the market. And, you know, we've been able to leverage and work either on small projects and small grants to offload. You know, we're a small team still, and being able to offload some of that work and some of that early research investigation work with an organization like CSID, for example, helps us, you know, try and, you know, focus maybe more on the day-to-day stuff while still keeping a hand on the future.
Yeah, and obviously you raise a good point there in terms of how you work with academia. So we're not just talking about startups and scale-ups really coming in for a very long research project where it's looking at the research that's being completed that's out there that could potentially help solve that problem that you're having and integrating that IP to a degree within your companies. And both of you, I guess, have had that kind of experience. Yeah,
it is, and I think there's an important point as well just to keep in mind, especially when you're looking on certain industries like hardware security, you know, and Joshua as a VC, VCs do tend to get scared of that element of investing into it. People do get scared of investment in such type of industries, and that's where, you know, the bridge with the universities, the research into that areas, and the government subsidizing part of that research with the universities help to build. And we see the importance of hardware in security nowadays and where the move off it as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose Shadi and maybe Emma as well, I don't know if you guys find this as well, but we certainly found when we were, you know, expanding the business and growing the company, that having that link with the likes of CSID, for example, gives a lot of credibility in that space, you know, and being able to kind of say, look, we're working very closely with CSID on this technology, and that gave our customers and our potential partners a lot of confidence that, you know, we were being guided, especially in those very early days of our research and development.
Great, thank you. So Emma, ResearchSecure is well into that scale-up journey now, and so when customers bring you those challenges and those problems, where do you go to seek those solutions, and does academia come into that at all?
It was very interesting listening to people's sort of discussion points just now, because I was thinking to myself about our partnership and our activities and how the problems get realized in front of us. You know, it's not that the clients come to us with, here's our use case, please give us a solution. Often we are the ones that are spotting the problems as we're working with them, doing the monitoring on their networks. We said, have you thought about this? And I think there's one case study example I could put forward around digital maintenance, which, if you like, is the next level beyond classic cybersecurity monitoring and intrusion detection. And we were noticing that as we were working with the operators, that they were facing quite day-to-day operational issues, you know, with legacy systems and mature laptops. And it caused us to think, what can we do as a proof of concept development? So in parallel with our internal R&D, which is led by, you know, and funded and resourced, we approached the University of Birmingham, and we did a rapid response tender and a rapid sprint proof of concept under DFT innovation grant funding, the TRIG program with Connected Places Catapult. And in 6 months, we managed to engage very widely with stakeholders. And because we were partnered with a university, it wasn't seen as a commercial company asking, what do you need? So it gave us a different platform and a broader reach. So that's not specifically the research itself, but the role of universities and the partnerships we were able to grow. And that's just one university, one open call grant, one proof of concept. When you tap into networks of universities, such as the Petrus one, then you access much widely. So universities can help scale up, grow further, raise more rounds of funding by being a broader ecosystem in which we operate.
Thanks, Emma. So, Josh, as a VC, you're coming at it obviously from a different perspective than the three companies here, and a different point of view. So why does OSNI dedicate time and resource really to build in those relationships with academia? I mean, you're a great friend of CSIT, so and why do you value that?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think all of those points are incredibly valid. I think the point of credibility certainly adds an extra layer of something interesting to opportunities we see there. And really it sort of touches on that sort of on the pulse point in terms of they are great places for us to find early stage opportunities to invest into. And typically things that are being worked on, particularly in research labs, are by definition at the frontier of what's possible in innovation in the space. And so for us, it allows us to get upstream of opportunities before they come to the broader market to candidly see things before others can. But then also allows us to establish that relationship with the researcher, with the academic, earlier than when they're coming to the market today for a funding round. So it allows us to have longitudinal relationships with founders. So yeah, it's an incredibly important part of our sourcing and origination strategy is building those relationships and maintaining those relationships.
So again, from the point of meeting those academics that could potentially translate or create their own impact through spin-outs, et cetera, and become their own founders, but I guess also that you're aware of what is being researched, what's coming down the line, so when a company approaches you, perhaps, or
definitely.
whether they're associated with the university or not, you know that this is...
Yeah, definitely. And we do a fair bit of work with the universities around the country to do our little bit to legitimize entrepreneurship as a career path after that, because it's a big, scary world, but we try and help to do our little bit to do that as well.
Yeah, no, and that certainly helps with roles like myself, where we don't use terms like commercialization. It tends to scare all of the academics out of the room. So impact, yeah, and translation. So moving on then, as commercial entities, I guess, well, for all of you, you all have the common factors of and focus on time, growth, and money, and profit. And given the perception that working with academia can be slow and perhaps with strings attached in terms of IP, equity, etc. How does this, or does it affect the opportunities for the translation of that research maybe into investment? If we go to you, Josh, first as that VC, you know, how does it sit when academic IP and those strings sort of play a part in a company seeking investment?
Yeah, and so as you can imagine, it's a fairly common occurrence for us, given what we do. I think broadly the challenge is that there's no standard model. Yeah. And so we have to be on the lookout for nuance in the relationship that introduces risk. And so broadly that's across a couple of different things, both in terms of equity ownership being the main and obvious one, both in terms of the value of that equity ownership or the percentage of equity ownership, but also the mechanism as well. And so again, because of that lack of standardization, it's quite often a few different models that introduce that. And so whether it's too much equity or whether it's a highly complex mechanism for the transfer of ownership, both of those things can impact the investability of what we're looking at. Beyond that, there's a couple of bits around team as well. And so you know, quite often there's interesting dynamics in those types of companies where there's an academic that's maintaining that academic presence and career beyond the spin out, and so understanding what that looks like practically in terms of how much time they're going to be spending versus teaching, and then just building on that team piece as well. I think typically by definition, these people are deep technical experts in their domain, and so understanding how they've complemented their skill set with the opposite skill set, you know, the commercial go-to-market skill set is always really important, and again varies hugely from company to company. But yeah, there are a couple of things that we look out for, but broadly a well-trodden path and really exciting.
And even when it comes to those non-academic founders, should I say, where there's a piece of perhaps licensed IP into a company where there maybe you're not thinking about that academic, that team member, the academic being part of the team. Again, does that make you run for the hills, or does it straight away think this is more complicated, I'll talk to the other company first? Or
We see that less
Okay.
in terms of that sort of middle ground of, typically we see the very early stage companies that are born out of a piece of IP that's been created and then spun out of the university. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, where you've got big corporate sponsoring innovation, there's sort of that middle ground, which I think where that sits, which
Yeah.
we don't see an awful lot of, because typically we've funded something that is right at the start of its journey, and that's what it's focused on. So the only thing that would cause concern is if that introduces a sort of lack of focus on one unified vision. So if there's 2 or 3 things that you've brought in from an IP point of view, and all of a sudden it derails everyone's, and everyone's got different different views on where it should go, then that's the only thing that.
I can't
Cause
comment
concern.
on this, looking back in the day in my previous startups, when coming out from academia and bringing something from academia and from the universities, during my time at Royal Holloway, and talking with VCs to invest, and we're talking around 10, 12 years ago, there was a scare. You know, they would get worried about that one and that engagement. However, to the point that Joshua was saying, and what I have seen over the past, especially over the past 5 years, there's a huge shift towards actually some of the investment or the VC's entities, that they question of how much of your research is coming actually out from a university that has been through peer reviews, has been approved, have been discussed into different ecosystems, and also looking into your team about how many of them have been involved into academic research in order to support, especially when we're talking in areas such as deep tech, whether in cyber or in other industries. I've seen a bit of a shift as in favorism towards that side in comparison to back in the days when they used to get scared about it and to say, well, yeah, there's an IP now licensing and all of that, and I'm not sure about it. And to the point that Emma have said about, you know, the ability and the agility, there was for a long time that perception of actually in academia it will take ages till things move on. You know, we need to move quickly. Now that is also changing as well on that side.
Yeah, and absolutely, and great point, Josh, in terms of the middle ground. I guess that's where I'm trying to come at, in terms of it's not just those spin-outs from university or indeed the huge companies that can sponsor so many PhDs, et cetera. It's that in between, and how can the work that we've all done and the millions of pounds of research money spent on it, how can we expose it to the ecosystem and the startups and scale-ups. And I guess with that in mind, although Shadi, you've maybe answered some of this, but when you guys are looking at those challenges and those problems and the innovations that need to be continuously moving forward to maintain the value in your IP, how do things like the speed and the strings that maybe were traditionally associated with working with academia or with that IP, how does that play into whether you look to academic research to solve those problems or to assist or at least enable your, I guess, capacity, capability and confidence to innovate, grow and compete in the sector?
Well, it's an important role. I mean, we look at it to the point that both Emma and Baj have mentioned. One is reaching out to someone who's looking and forecasting into the future, and when you have a challenge and you want them to bring in new ideas to see how you can resolve it, that is ideal. And the agility and the quickness, it can be improved, but it's have been improved massively from before into the process as well, because it depends on the capacity, let's be honest, as also academia and university are an organization. They would be running other projects, etc. And again, to the point, Emma, you've mentioned it, with engagement with networks like Petrus and others, you have a wider group, but also when you're engaging with the end user and trying to understand and try to resolve that challenge, it's a different interaction when it's a mix of, you know, academia and an organization, because they're not they won't see it as a sales opportunity that you're trying to sell hard to them, but actually trying to work with them and build something to resolve, especially when you were talking about safety critical industries, you know, like in the transports, like into critical national infrastructure, because there's a bigger risk than actually just you as an organization, it's the whole ecosystem. But for us, at least within Angoka, we always look into the collaboration with the universities, with the academia in general, as an ecosystem, because that is a green field and a honeypot with ideas that you can take and resolve on. I mean, if I look in our solutions, parts of the stuff that comes within our technology is based from the medical industry, from the physics industry, and then from the world of cyber, and then the engineering. So it's different type of research that we managed to try to bring it together and put it together in order to achieve what we have achieved so far.
Great. Emma, if I maybe go to you.
That would be great to follow through on the points that's made. At Razor Secure, we are well established and trusted in that scale-up route, and actually we've grown our IP from scratch ourselves. We have a research division, and I say a research mindset, quite a lot of PhDs. We have that academic capability within our organization. So the question is, when you look at the relationships with the academic ecosystem, there are many opportunities and ways of working together. And I think that at the stage we're at, the capabilities that we're growing inside, for those of you that were in the Stream C session earlier on, we're currently migrating our system components to Rust. We were talking about hardware security. We look at it in terms of sort of sprint projects. There are complex problems coming to us, and each time we go and talk with train operators or manufacturing, we're seeing on a different slant. So it's very much that rapid response, quick teaming up with complementary capabilities in universities, talking to government and funding bodies as well, who are a hidden power behind the scenes that make this all happen. And picking a project, talking about it, and because it's joint research, being able to talk about it in the public domain whilst retaining a large volume of our IP that's proprietary to us within the company to help drive forward our growth and investment. So we're in an interesting place at Razor Secure right now.
Great. Braj?
Yeah, that was that was really interesting, because I think from both of you, our sort of experience does match that to an extent. And Emma, your point about, you know, having that kind of sprint sort of mindset, and obviously at the start of the sprint you define exactly what you want to try and achieve, and you know, you take a big problem and you break it down into smaller chunks, and oftentimes there's a small building block, or a building block that, you know, you can work on with an organization in that public sphere. And you know, we've done that plenty of times where we've engaged with the likes of CSIT or other organizations to try and solve a certain aspect of the problem that's blocking us, while we sort of focus on, as Emma said, retaining our IP, or, you know, working with something that we've already established to see, right, is there an application of our established technology in a certain field, and, you know, then being able to leverage that research to go to customers and take that forward, whilst the university obviously benefits from the publications and the applications there. So yeah, no, very similar experiences to the two other organizations.
Great. So I guess one of or several of the objectives that I wanted to achieve from the panel session today was really encouraging any startups, scale-ups, SMEs that would attend the session to look at, you know, if they're faced with a problem, faced with a challenge that's being presented to them by their customers, by their marketplace, to reach out and be part of that collaboration with academia. And maybe Shadi and Braj, just before we finish up, so not too long left, but in terms of pros and cons of working with academia, given what we've talked about with IP constraints and the lack of activity perhaps in that middle ground, you know, how would you, or you know, what advice would you give to any other company that's here that would help them maintain the value in their IP, and should they consider working with academia?
Yeah, I mean, from our side, you know, we've definitely benefited from that close relationship, even from an early perspective. And you know, Josh mentioned relationships there, and I think that's key. It's key. It's establishing those relationships and that give and take. You know, we've benefited a lot from working with the likes of Queen's, and would like to think that Queen's has benefited from working with us as well. And you know, it's finding those. You know, not every single academic institution is going to be the same. There is such a spectrum there, and there's such a different skill set. And it's finding that the right organization and the right academic department and the right academic who you'll be able to develop that relationship with. And from our side, we've been able to bring academics on our board, our advisory board, and we've been able to have that almost separation and leveraging the partnerships there, but also putting in contracts and stuff in place to then bring them into the company a bit more formally. Without having to pay them, necessarily full time, which can be expensive, or maybe not even the academic wants that. We've got academics who do want to maintain that academic career. So no, I'd recommend it, and there are definitely multiple mechanisms that you can leverage.
Great. Shadi,
Yeah,
yourself?
no, I agree with Baj about it. At the same time, I mean, the scientific board that we have is purely from different academias that we work with, and we utilize and we lean on them to give us the advice. Where's the new forecast? Where are the new technologies that are coming in? What things that we need to keep an eye on? But also going back and collaborating with it for anyone who's thinking, similar to what Nike say, just do it, to be honest. And the reason for that is a lot of the times when, yes, I agree with you, be very clear about what you want to achieve from that and approach it as a partnership, not as, I'm giving you work, you're going to give me the results out. Because one of the main things that we have realized and we found through our engagement, especially with CSET at the early days, is we discovered a lot of things that we can do, we haven't thought about it. And we can improve on top of it from our technology, which help us to build and get to the points where we are and different type of applications that then we start going through it. So approach it as a partnership. The motto is the word team. Together we achieve, more, and that is the main thing in order to work and collaborate with. And the idea within the IP and the licensing, that becomes about knowing what you want to do and how you can have a clear agreement with that university or with that research institution and that personnel in order towards what are the boundaries, where are, our own proprietary approach, and what is the universities and how we can collaborate and work into that side as well.
Great, thank you. And I guess, coming from that, it's very much, as you mentioned there within the collaboration, that win-win approach really,
100%.
where it's not just where the university is trying to gain or work for more research funding, and indeed it's not about a company looking to gain access to that IP with no investment from themselves. And I guess that's part of the struggle that I certainly have in my role, and in other unis, I'm sure they're the same, particularly in that middle ground. So if I go to maybe Emma and Josh, in terms of any policymakers that are in the room, whether it be from government, DCIT, and indeed from university, from those tech transfer teams, et cetera, where ultimately, I can protect and coach and work with companies and create these relationships and collaborations. But at some point, it's launched onto the base that is the policy that goes along with it. So any advice that you can give the policymakers here that could suggest and, that would make it easier for that research to be used in that middle ground growth plans? Maybe Emma?
Well, I think I'd like to sort of start by illustrating like what I consider a really good case study example where it's working in practice. So the UK Department for Transport has a research program called TRIG, and they have a large program of grants, relatively small, but an open call category, which allows organizations, whether it's universities or academia, to team up in any which way they want and put forward ideas for research across all transport modes. And this has been very effective in allowing good things to bubble to the surface. And the policymakers and the government, so the Department for Transport, have their areas of research interest, which is available to all. And that gives you a framework into which you can seed the ideas and the possibilities and the teamings that are coming up. So create a framework to allow people to sort of make their suggestions, and a small amount of seed funding resources always helps.
Josh?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think when thinking about sort of spinning that IP out of a university, I think it's really important to make it as simple but also as completely unremarkable as possible, both for the benefit of investors, of course, but then also for the benefit of the people doing the spinning out as well, the founders. And so, because if it's too complex, then nobody will do it. So, so I think that's probably the first point. I think second piece, then just about considering the amount of equity that's being taken and making sure that you're setting the company up for its best chance of success. And then finally, as I mentioned at the start, we do lots about legitimizing that sort of entrepreneurship career path, and there's lots happening across all the UK universities at the moment that we're working with. So I think just more and more of that. I think it's a wonderful place to go in that, particularly in that sort of early career. And I think the more that can be done to incentivize that is for the better.
Fantastic, yeah. And I guess we, very much today, obviously being from an academic institution, we've focused on academic research, but Emma, particularly yourself, you've mentioned a few of the other government organisations and departments you've been working with, and obviously we're hosted here today by NCSE. So I would say that a lot of what we're discussing today doesn't just apply to academic research, but it's also the translation of that research coming out from government organisations, as you're saying. So again, getting access to that that will help bridge that gap in the middle ground. That is pretty much us today, and thank you everyone so much for taking part in the panel today. We didn't think we would have time, and we were right in terms of opening up for questions, but I know I'm certainly around for the rest of the day and tomorrow, and I think most of the guys are here as well, so feel free to approach us at any point. But I really do think that what we've discussed today sits right in the heart of the theme of what the whole Cyber UK conference is today, and indeed the message of collaboration and that strong foundation that was given by Lindy this morning. So thank you all once again, and we'll continue to work together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.